Prince brought his mistress out of shame for his wife. But when she arrived, his world collapsed. Before we begin, let us know where you're listening from. After the story, rate it from 1 to 10. Now let's start. In a time when reputation was everything and a scandal could ruin even the most established family name, there lived a man of considerable fortune and questionable judgment. Lord Zachary Sutton, the Duke of Hartsfield, was blessed with everything a gentleman of consequence could desire: wealth beyond measure, estates that sprawled across 3 counties, and a face that had launched 1,000 debutante dreams. Yet, dear reader, our dashing Duke possessed one fatal flaw that would prove his undoing. He believed himself cleverer than the machinery of society itself. The Tun, as you well know, has eyes everywhere. Behind every potted palm at Almack's, within every whispered conversation during the opening strains of a quadrille, society's watchful guardians observe, catalog, and prepare to disseminate the slightest indiscretion. And Lord Sutton, despite his 30 years navigating these treacherous waters, had somehow convinced himself he was impervious to its currents. "One must wonder," remarked Lady Featherton to her companion at Lady Carrington's midsummer ball, "how a man of such intelligence could be so thoroughly witless in matters of discretion." Indeed, one must. Our story properly begins on a crisp autumn morning in 1816, when the London fog hung heavy over Grosvenor Square, much like the cloud of rumors surrounding His Grace's recent activities. The Duke's marriage to the elegant Lady Eleanor Sutton had been arranged, as these things often are, with all the emotional fervor of a business transaction. 6 years of matrimony had produced 2 heirs and a mutual tolerance that passed for contentment among the upper echelons. Lady Eleanor had fulfilled her duties admirably. She managed his households, presented herself impeccably at every required social function, and raised their children with the appropriate blend of affection and distance prescribed by their station. What more could a husband require? Quite a bit more, it seemed, for Lord Sutton had developed what he presumed to be a discreet arrangement with a certain widow from Bath, a Mrs. Amelia Westmoreland, whose husband had conveniently expired, leaving her with beauty, wit, and not a farthing to her name. Their association had remained suitably hidden for nearly a year, confined to his rarely used hunting lodge in Somerset and the occasional clandestine visit to her modest lodgings when his business brought him to Bath. For a man who can calculate the yield of his northern estates to the penny, our narrator must observe, his calculations regarding matters of the heart proved remarkably deficient. On this particular morning, the Duke's valet, Thompson, entered his master's chambers with the Morning Post and an expression that suggested he'd bitten into an underripe persimmon. "Your Grace," he began, presenting a small silver tray bearing a single letter, "a communication has arrived that requires your immediate attention." The Duke, still in his dressing gown and nursing his second cup of coffee, took the letter with mild curiosity. The handwriting was unfamiliar, a feminine hand, certainly, but not one he recognized. As his eyes scanned the contents, his complexion shifted from healthy aristocratic pallor to something approaching the color of whey. Thompson, ever the professional, pretended not to notice as he laid out his master's writing clothes. The letter, you see, came from a Miss Helena Pennington, lately of Dorset, who wrote with the most extraordinary claim that she was the daughter of Mrs. Amelia Westmoreland and, by extension, of certain activities that need not be detailed in polite company, quite possibly the Duke's own offspring. What made this claim particularly troublesome was not merely its existence, but its timing. For Miss Pennington, having recently reached her 21st year and finding herself without prospects following her mother's sudden passing, had determined to seek acknowledgment from the man she believed to be her father. She would, she informed him with alarming directness, be arriving in London within the fortnight. The audacity, Lord Sutton muttered, crumpling the letter in his fist. Amelia never mentioned a daughter. Not once. Thompson, who had served the Duke since his bachelor days and knew far more than he ever acknowledged, merely raised an eyebrow. "Indeed, Your Grace," he replied, in that particular tone which conveyed volumes while saying nothing at all. What Thompson knew, and what the Duke had conveniently forgotten, was that his association with Amelia Westmoreland had actually begun 22 years prior, during his wild youth before his father had arranged his advantageous marriage. Their affair had been brief but passionate, ending when young Zachary Sutton was sent on his grand tour of the continent to separate him from his unsuitable infatuation. And now, it seemed, that youthful indiscretion had produced a consequence that was about to arrive on his doorstep. "Thompson," the Duke said after a lengthy silence, "arrange for a carriage to Bath. Immediately. Your Grace intends to intercept the young lady before she reaches London?" "No," the Duke replied, a plan forming in his mind that would later strike him as evidence of temporary insanity. "I intend to meet with her and assess her claim. If she is indeed who she claims to be, I shall provide for her suitably and privately." What Lord Sutton failed to consider was that privacy was a luxury rarely afforded to men of his station, particularly when they behaved in a manner as suspicious as suddenly departing for Bath with minimal notice. Lady Eleanor, contrary to her husband's assumption, was neither unobservant nor unintelligent. 6 years of marriage had taught her the rhythms of her husband's behavior, and this sudden journey struck a discordant note. "Penrose," she addressed her lady's maid that same evening, "I believe I shall accompany his Grace to Bath. The waters would do wonders for my constitution, don't you think?" Penrose, who understood her mistress's unspoken communications perfectly, began packing immediately. And so it came to pass that Lord Sutton arrived in Bath expecting to manage a delicate situation in private, only to discover his wife had somehow preceded him and was comfortably installed in the Royal Crescent, receiving visitors as though she had planned this sojourn for months. "My dear," Lady Eleanor greeted him with a kiss on the cheek that was observed by no fewer than 7 notable society matrons taking tea in the pump room. "How delightful that you've joined me. I was just telling Lady Brocklesby how inspired you were to suggest this trip." The Duke, caught thoroughly off guard, could only smile tightly and wonder how quickly his carefully constructed world was about to unravel. Miss Helena Pennington, meanwhile, was not in Bath at all, but had already arrived in London and taken modest lodgings near Russell Square. Young, beautiful, and possessed of her mother's wit combined with a directness that society would find either refreshing or appalling, Helena had determined that waiting for the Duke to acknowledge her existence might well mean waiting forever. "Fortune," she told her companion, "the very sensible Miss Olivia Jenkins, favors the bold. And I, having nothing to lose but my obscurity, intend to be very bold indeed." Miss Jenkins, whose position as companion was both recent and precarious, could only hope that boldness would not lead to complete social ruin. What Helena had not revealed in her letter, for strategic reasons that demonstrated she had inherited more than just her mother's appearance, was that Amelia had left her with a collection of letters spanning 2 decades. Letters from the Duke himself, first as the passionate young Zachary and later as the more measured Lord Sutton, that established beyond reasonable doubt the nature of their connection. "One must always hold something in reserve," Helena explained to the wide-eyed Miss Jenkins, "particularly when dealing with men of power who prefer their indiscretions remain buried." In one of those delicious twists that fate occasionally provides to enliven society gossip, the annual Hartsfield ball was scheduled for the following week. This grand affair, hosted by the Duke and Duchess at their London residence, was among the most coveted invitations of the season, and Miss Helena Pennington, having taken the measure of London society during her brief residence, understood that gaining entry to this event would accomplish in one evening what might otherwise take months of maneuvering. Fortune, it seemed, did indeed favor the bold, for Helena's landlady was cousin to the housekeeper at Hartsfield House. A few discreet inquiries, a carefully composed note, and a modest financial consideration later, Miss Pennington had secured a position for the evening as an additional lady's maid, to assist with the crush of guests expected for the ball. "This is madness," Miss Jenkins protested when informed of the plan. "Absolute madness. You cannot simply infiltrate a ducal household." "Cannot I?" Helena replied with a gleam in her eye. "Watch me." While Helena plotted her introduction to society, the Duke and Duchess were engaged in a delicate marital minuet in Bath. Lady Eleanor, ever the consummate strategist, had determined to give her husband sufficient rope to hang himself. "Tell me, my dear," she inquired over breakfast in their private dining room, "what urgent business brings you to Bath? I find myself quite curious, as you've mentioned no dealings in this region for at least a year." The Duke, who had spent a sleepless night composing and discarding various explanations, opted for a partial truth. "A matter regarding a former acquaintance," he replied, focusing intently on buttering his toast. "Nothing of consequence, merely a loose end that requires tying." "How fascinating," Lady Eleanor responded with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "And does this loose end have a name?" Before Lord Sutton could formulate a response that wouldn't immediately condemn him, salvation arrived in the form of a messenger bearing an urgent communication from his London steward. The Hartsfield ball preparations were underway, and his presence was required to resolve certain matters that couldn't be decided in his absence. Never had the Duke been so grateful for the complexities of managing a grand social event. "It appears we must cut our visit short," he announced, waving the letter as evidence. "The demands of our London household cannot wait." Lady Eleanor, who had her own sources of information in London that rivaled her husband's, merely nodded. "Indeed, the ball must take precedence. We shall depart tomorrow." And so the principal players in our drama converged upon London, each with their own agenda, each unaware of the impending collision that society would discuss for seasons to come. The evening of the Hartsfield ball arrived with all the anticipation such events generate. Carriages lined the street outside the Duke's magnificent townhouse, disgorging the cream of society in their finest attire. Inside, footmen in the Sutton liveries circulated with champagne. The orchestra played the opening strains of a country dance, and the Duke and Duchess stood at the entrance to the ballroom, greeting their guests with practiced smiles. Below stairs, Helena Pennington adjusted her borrowed maid's uniform and took a steadying breath. "Remember," the housekeeper instructed, "you are to remain invisible unless summoned. The ladies' retiring room may require attention as the evening progresses. Otherwise, stand against the wall and await instructions." Helena nodded obediently, her heart pounding beneath the severe black dress. She had not yet formulated exactly how she would engineer an encounter with the Duke, but she was certain an opportunity would present itself. As the evening progressed, Helena observed the intricate dance of high society from her position along the ballroom wall. She noted Lady Eleanor's gracious manner, the Duke's occasional forced laugh, and the way the ton's most eligible bachelors circled the available young ladies like well-dressed sharks scenting opportunity. Among these gentlemen was Lord Stanwick, Earl of Westbury, whose reputation as both a scholar and something of a rake made him an object of fascination among the marriage-minded mammas. Tall, with eyes the color of stormy seas and a mouth given to unexpected smiles, Lord Stanwick moved through society with the casual confidence of a man who knew his worth precisely. "Do stop staring, Zephyr," his sister, Lady Beatrice, hissed as they circulated through the crowd. "Lady Harrington has noticed your interest in her daughter and is already plotting wedding breakfast menus." "My interest extends only to the remarkable similarity between Miss Harrington's coiffure and the nesting habits of certain exotic birds," he replied with a grin. "Though I would never say so aloud and risk your wrath." "Your problem," Lady Beatrice informed him, "is that you find fault with every eligible young lady presented to you. One is too frivolous, another too serious. This one talks excessively, that one hardly speaks at all." Lord Stanwick sighed, a sound that had caused many a female heart to flutter over the years. "I merely wish for a woman who can match me in intellect without sacrificing warmth. Is that so unreasonable?" Before his sister could respond, a commotion near the refreshment table drew their attention. A young maid, Helena, though they did not yet know her name, had apparently tripped while carrying a tray of empty champagne glasses. The resulting crash momentarily silenced the nearest conversations. What observers failed to notice was that her stumble had been perfectly timed to coincide with the Duke passing that very spot, and that her fall had brought her directly into his path. "Your Grace," Helena gasped, looking up into the face of the man whose blood ran in her veins, "I do beg your pardon." The Duke, prepared to deliver a stern reprimand to the clumsy servant, froze as recognition dawned. The eyes looking up at him were unmistakably familiar, the same unusual shade of amber that had captivated him 2 decades earlier when they belonged to Amelia Westmoreland. "You," he whispered, his complexion once again achieving that remarkable whey-like quality. Yes, Helena replied softly, accepting the hand he automatically extended to help her rise. Me. Lord Stanwick, observing this curious exchange and being both a gentleman and naturally curious, stepped forward to assist. Allow me to help clear this, Your Grace, he offered, already kneeling to gather the larger pieces of broken glass. As he did so, he glanced up at the maid and found himself momentarily transfixed by a face that seemed far too refined for her station. Thank you, Stanwick, the Duke managed, recovering his composure. Most appreciated. Girl, return to the kitchen immediately and inform Mrs. Winters of this incident. Helena cursed obediently, but not before giving Lord Stanwick a look of such intelligent assessment that he found himself quite unable to resume his previous conversation with his sister. The Duke, meanwhile, made his excuses and retreated to his study, where he poured himself a generous measure of brandy with a hand that was not entirely steady. How had she found him? What did she want? And how, in God's name, was he to extricate himself from this situation without causing a scandal that would rock the very foundations of his life? His contemplation was interrupted by the door opening to admit his wife, whose expression suggested she had questions that would not be easily deflected. Zachary, Lady Eleanor began, using his Christian name in a manner that indicated serious matters were at hand. Perhaps you might explain why you're hiding in your study while our guests await your return? Before he could formulate a response, the door opened again, this time admitting a footman bearing a silver salver. Begging your pardon, Your Grace, but Mrs. Winters sent this note requiring your immediate attention regarding a staff matter. The Duke took the folded paper and dismissed the servant with a nod. Opening it, he found not the housekeeper's handwriting but the same feminine script that had arrived in that fateful letter. Asterisk 20 minutes in the East Garden. Come alone, or I shall be forced to seek a more public audience. Asterisk. Is something amiss with the staff? Lady Eleanor inquired, her tone suggesting she knew perfectly well that something beyond servants' concerns was occurring. A minor matter, the Duke replied, tucking the note into his waistcoat pocket. Nothing that need concern you, my dear. Lady Eleanor studied her husband with the careful assessment that had served her well throughout their marriage. How curious, she observed, that minor matters seem to be multiplying around you of late. The Duke, recognizing the dangerous waters into which he was sailing, attempted a reassuring smile. The pressures of hosting such an event, nothing more. I shall attend to this quickly and return to our guests. As he made his way through the crowded ballroom toward the terrace doors that led to the garden, Lord Sutton failed to notice he had acquired a shadow. Lord Stanwick, intrigued by the earlier interaction and possessed of a scholar's inability to leave mysteries unsolved, had observed the Duke's hasty exit from his study and subsequent purposeful progression toward the gardens. Curiosity, that most compelling of human motivations, propelled Lord Stanwick to follow at a discreet distance. The East Garden of Hartsfield House was famous for its formal design and, more relevantly to our current situation, its secluded alcoves created by strategically placed hedges and statuary. In one such recess, illuminated by the moonlight filtering through the branches of an ancient oak, Helena Pennington waited. She had discarded the maid's cap and collar, standing now in simple black that accentuated the proud tilt of her chin and the determination in her posture. As the Duke approached, she stepped forward from the shadows. Miss Pennington, I presume, Lord Sutton said, his voice low and controlled. You have gone to extraordinary lengths to secure this meeting. Extraordinary circumstances call for extraordinary measures, Your Grace, Helena replied, her voice remarkably steady for one so young confronting one so powerful. When conventional approaches are closed to one, alternatives must be found. What exactly do you want? The Duke demanded, glancing nervously back toward the house, where the sounds of the orchestra and the laughter of his guests created a surreal backdrop to this clandestine meeting. Recognition, Helena stated simply. Not public, if that is your concern. I have no desire to create scandal, but I require acknowledgement of my existence and the support that should rightfully be mine as your daughter. The Duke's laugh held no humor. Your mother made no such claims during her lifetime. Why should I believe them now, from a young woman who appears from nowhere with a convenient story and, no doubt, substantial financial needs? Helena's eyes, those remarkable amber eyes that so mirrored his own, flashed with indignation. My mother protected you at great cost to herself. She raised me alone, educated me as best she could, and never once asked you for support beyond what you voluntarily provided during your arrangement. From his position behind a conveniently placed statue of Diana the Huntress, Lord Stanwick absorbed this exchange with growing fascination. The implications were explosive, the drama unfolding before him more compelling than any novel he had ever read. I have her letters, Helena continued, removing a small packet from her pocket. Every one you sent, from your first passionate declarations to your last cold dismissal upon her illness. Would you like to refresh your memory regarding their contents? The Duke blanched, reaching for the letters with a hand that trembled visibly even in the dim light. This is blackmail. This is justice, Helena corrected him. I do not ask for your name, your public acknowledgement, or even a significant portion of your vast fortune. I ask only for what you would surely provide to any child of your blood, the means to live with dignity and pursue a respectable life. As the Duke struggled to formulate a response, a new voice entered the conversation. I believe, said Lady Eleanor, stepping from the shadows of the garden path, that this discussion might benefit from my participation. Lord Stanwick, still concealed behind his goddess of the hunt, bit his lip to prevent an exclamation of surprise. The plot, as they say, had thickened considerably. The Duke whirled to face his wife, his expression that of a man watching his carefully constructed world crumble before his eyes. Eleanor, this is not what it appears, isn't it? Lady Eleanor replied, her voice remarkably calm given the circumstances. It appears to be a conversation between a father and his daughter. Have I misunderstood? Helena, who had not anticipated this development, curtsied deeply to the Duchess. Your Grace, I must apologize for the intrusion. It was never my intention to disrupt your household or cause pain. Lady Eleanor studied the young woman before her with an expression that gave nothing away. And yet, here we are, Miss Pennington, Your Grace. Helena Pennington. Miss Pennington, the Duchess continued, while I cannot claim to be pleased by this revelation, I find myself curious about your intentions. You speak of requiring support rather than scandal. This suggests a pragmatism I can appreciate. The Duke looked from his wife to his alleged daughter with growing bewilderment. This was not proceeding according to any scenario he had imagined. Perhaps, Lady Eleanor suggested, we might continue this discussion in a more appropriate setting than the garden during a ball. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, in my private sitting room. We shall hear your case in full, Miss Pennington, and determine a suitable resolution. Helena, recognizing both the olive branch and the dismissal contained in this invitation, curtsied again. You are most gracious, Your Grace. I shall attend at the appointed hour. Excellent. Lady Eleanor replied with a smile that contained more steel than warmth. Now, if you would be so good as to depart via the servants' entrance, we shall return to our guests and maintain the facade of normality that society so requires. As Helena moved to leave, Lord Stanwick found himself in the awkward position of needing to retreat before his presence was discovered. In his haste to withdraw, he displaced a small decorative urn, which toppled from its pedestal with a crash that echoed through the garden. Who's there? The Duke demanded, his already frayed nerves stretched to breaking point. Lord Stanwick, recognizing that dignity could only be preserved through honesty at this juncture, stepped forward with a rueful smile. My apologies, Your Grace. I fear my evening constitutional took an unexpected turn. Lord Stanwick, Lady Eleanor acknowledged with narrowed eyes. How remarkable that your constitutional should bring you to this precise location at this precise moment. Indeed, Your Grace, he agreed, bowing slightly. The coincidences of life continue to astonish me. Helena, who had paused at the commotion, now found herself face to face with the gentleman who had assisted her earlier. Recognition flickered in her eyes, followed by something that might have been amusement despite the gravity of the situation. We meet again, sir, she said softly. Though in rather different circumstances. Lord Stanwick, captivated anew by the intelligence in her gaze and the composure she maintained in this extraordinary situation, bowed formally. Miss Pennington, I believe. A pleasure to make your acquaintance properly. The Duke, watching this exchange with growing horror, stepped forward. Stanwick, I must insist on your discretion in this matter. Of course, Your Grace, Lord Stanwick replied, his expression serious. You have my word as a gentleman. Lady Eleanor, demonstrating the practical nature that had managed the Sutton estates and reputation for 6 years, took control of the situation. Lord Stanwick, since circumstances have made you privy to our family matter, perhaps you might escort Miss Pennington safely to her lodgings. It would be most unfortunate if she were to encounter any difficulties at this late hour. Before the Duke could protest this suggestion, Lord Stanwick bowed his agreement. It would be my honor, Your Grace. And so, dear reader, as the Duke and Duchess returned to their ballroom to continue the charade of hosting the season's most anticipated event, Lord Stanwick and Miss Pennington slipped away through the garden gate, an unlikely pair united by circumstance, and, perhaps, something more. Your carriage, I presume, is not available, Lord Stanwick remarked as they reached the street. Helena laughed softly, the sound surprisingly musical given the tension of the evening. I arrived as a lady's maid, my lord. Carriages are not generally provided for servants. Then we shall secure a hackney, he decided, offering his arm with a formality that acknowledged her true station rather than her disguise. And you shall tell me, if you are so inclined, how a young lady of obvious breeding and education came to infiltrate a ducal household in such a dramatic fashion. As they walked, Helena found herself unexpectedly at ease with this aristocrat who had witnessed her most vulnerable moment. It is a long and somewhat sordid tale, my lord. The best kind, he assured her with a smile that transformed his scholarly features into something quite devastatingly handsome. And I am an excellent listener. By the time they reached her modest lodgings near Russell Square, Lord Stanwick had heard the outline of Helena's story and found himself both impressed by her courage and outraged on her behalf. You intend to face them alone tomorrow? He asked as they stood at the entrance to her building. Helena nodded, her determination evident even in the dim light of the street lamps. This is my battle to fight, Lord Stanwick. Zephyr, he corrected her. And while I respect your independence, Miss Pennington, I wonder if you might permit me to accompany you. Not to speak for you, he added hastily, seeing her expression, but to provide moral support, and perhaps to lend an additional perspective to the negotiations. Helena studied him thoughtfully. Why would you involve yourself in this unseemly situation, my lord? You risk association with scandal and the displeasure of a powerful peer. Lord Stanwick's smile held a hint of mischief. Perhaps I have a natural affinity for lost causes and underdogs. Or perhaps I simply find you the most interesting person I've encountered in an age of vapid social interactions. After a moment's consideration, Helena nodded. Very well, Lord Stanwick. I accept your offer of support, though I warn you, the morning may prove uncomfortable for all involved. I shall bring my thickest skin, he promised, bowing over her hand. Until tomorrow, Miss Pennington. As Helena watched him stride away, she wondered at the strange turns her quest for justice had taken. She had come to London seeking acknowledgement from a father who had abandoned her mother. She had not expected to find an ally in his wife, nor a champion in one of society's most eligible bachelors. The following morning dawned clear and bright, as though nature itself wished to illuminate the drama about to unfold in the Duchess's private sitting room. Helena arrived promptly at 10, dressed in her finest morning gown, a modest affair of pale blue muslin that nonetheless highlighted her natural grace. To her surprise, Lord Stanwick awaited her on the steps of Hartsfield House, looking remarkably alert for a gentleman who had presumably been at a ball until the early hours. Miss Pennington, he greeted her with a bow. I took the liberty of arriving early to ensure our reception. And was it favorable? She inquired, accepting his arm as they ascended the steps. His expression suggested it had been anything but. The Duke appeared somewhat dismayed by my continued involvement. The Duchess, however, seemed rather amused. They were admitted by a butler whose impressive impassivity suggested he had seen far stranger things in his service to the Sutton family. Led through the grand entrance hall and up a sweeping staircase, Helena found herself in a part of the house that guests at last night's ball would never have glimpsed, the private family quarters. The Duchess's sitting room was a testament to refined feminine taste. pale green walls adorned with delicate watercolors, comfortable furnishings arranged for conversation rather than show, and French windows that overlooked the garden where last night's confrontation had occurred. Lady Eleanor rose as they entered, her morning dress of lavender silk rustling softly. "Miss Pennington, Lord Stanwick." "How prompt you are." The Duke, standing by the fireplace with the rigid posture of a man facing execution, merely nodded stiffly. "Please, be seated," Lady Eleanor continued, indicating a small grouping of chairs. "I have taken the liberty of ordering chocolate. I find difficult conversations proceed more smoothly with refreshment." As a maid appeared with a tray bearing a silver chocolate pot and delicate porcelain cups, Helena marveled at the Duchess's composure. Here was a woman confronting her husband's illegitimate daughter with the same gracious hospitality she might show a vicar's wife paying a morning call. Once the chocolate was served and the servants dismissed, Lady Eleanor turned her attention fully to Helena. "Now, Miss Pennington, I believe it is time for complete candor. You claim to be my husband's daughter from a relationship that predated our marriage. You have letters that apparently support this claim. What precisely do you seek from this recognition?" Helena, drawing strength from Lord Stanwick's supportive presence beside her, met the Duchess's gaze directly. "As I explained to His Grace last evening, I seek not scandal but security. My mother raised me to be independent, but her death has left me without protection or prospects. I ask only for what would allow me to live modestly but securely, perhaps a small annual allowance and assistance in establishing myself in a respectable position." "Such as?" the Duke asked, speaking for the first time since their arrival. "I am well educated, Your Grace. I speak French and Italian, play the pianoforte adequately, and have been told my watercolors show promise. I could serve as a governess or companion in a good family." Lord Stanwick frowned at this. Surely the daughter of a duke, acknowledged or not, deserves better than domestic service. The Duke shot him a quelling look. "This is hardly your concern, Stanwick." "On the contrary," Lady Eleanor interjected, surprising them all, "Lord Stanwick raises a valid point. If we accept Miss Pennington's claim, and I am inclined to do so, given the remarkable resemblance she bears to your mother, Zachary, then certain obligations of blood cannot be ignored, regardless of the circumstances of her birth." The Duke's expression suggested he had expected his wife to be the last person to advocate for his illegitimate offspring. "Eleanor, surely you cannot suggest we publicly acknowledge." "I suggest nothing of the sort," the Duchess interrupted smoothly. "The tongue would devour such a scandal with relish, and none of us desire that outcome. But there are ways to provide for Miss Pennington that preserve both her dignity and our reputation." Helena, who had prepared herself for rejection or at best grudging financial support, found herself quite disarmed by Lady Eleanor's practical approach to what must surely be a painful situation for her. "Your Grace," she ventured, "I must express my admiration for your handling of this difficult matter. Many women in your position would react with understandable anger." Lady Eleanor's smile held genuine amusement. "My dear Miss Pennington, anger is a luxury that accomplishes little. I have always preferred solutions to recriminations." She turned to her husband. "Zachary, I believe we should establish Miss Pennington with a suitable annuity, say, £500 per annum, and provide her with a respectable introduction to society, not as your daughter, but perhaps as a distant relation of mine who has come under our protection following her mother's passing." The Duke blinked rapidly, clearly struggling to comprehend this unexpected proposal. "You would sponsor her in society?" "It is the sensible solution," Lady Eleanor replied. "An acknowledged connection to our family, however distant, would provide Miss Pennington with the protection of our name without revealing the true nature of her parentage. It would also allow her to make a suitable marriage, should she so desire." Lord Stanwick, who had been following this exchange with growing admiration for the Duchess's strategic thinking, leaned forward. "If I might offer a suggestion, Your Grace?" Lady Eleanor inclined her head graciously. "By all means, Lord Stanwick. My sister, Lady Beatrice, has been lamenting the lack of suitable female companionship. Perhaps Miss Pennington might be introduced as your distant cousin who has come to stay with Lady Beatrice as a companion. This would provide an immediate entree into society under the protection of two respected families." Helena glanced at him in surprise. This was considerably more involvement than the moral support he had offered. An excellent suggestion, Lady Eleanor agreed. Lady Beatrice is universally respected, and her sponsorship, combined with ours, would place Miss Pennington beyond reproach. The Duke, seemingly resigned to his wife's management of the situation, nodded slowly. I suppose such an arrangement could work, provided all parties maintain absolute discretion regarding the true circumstances. Of course, Helena assured him, still somewhat dazed by this unexpected turn of events. I seek only security, not sensation. Then it is settled, Lady Eleanor declared with the satisfaction of one who has successfully navigated treacherous waters. Lord Stanwick, would you be so kind as to consult with Lady Beatrice regarding this arrangement? Meanwhile, I shall see to Miss Pennington's immediate needs, appropriate wardrobe, suitable lodgings until she can move to Lady Beatrice's household, and the necessary introductions. Lord Stanwick rose, bowing to the Duchess. It would be my pleasure, Your Grace. With your permission, I shall call on my sister this afternoon. As the meeting concluded and Helena prepared to depart, the Duke finally addressed her directly. Miss Pennington, while I cannot claim to be pleased by the manner of your introduction to our lives, I acknowledge my responsibility toward you. The arrangements my wife has proposed are generous and should be considered final resolution of any claims you might make. Helena, recognizing both the acknowledgement and the warning contained in his statement, curtsied. I understand perfectly, Your Grace. You have my word that I shall conduct myself with absolute propriety and discretion. As Lord Stanwick escorted her from Hartsfield House, Helena found herself struggling to absorb the morning's developments. This is not at all how I expected our meeting to proceed, she confessed as they walked toward the waiting hackney. The Duchess is a remarkable woman, Lord Stanwick observed. I've always admired her intelligence, but today's performance exceeded even my expectations. She turned what could have been a devastating scandal into a socially acceptable arrangement with remarkable efficiency, Helena agreed. I came seeking basic security and instead find myself about to be launched into society. Lord Stanwick's smile held a warmth that she was beginning to find quite distracting. The ton will be considerably enlivened by your arrival, Miss Pennington. I suspect you shall take London by storm. Or sink beneath the waves of social disapproval, she countered, practical despite her good fortune. I know nothing of the rules that govern your world. Then you shall have excellent teachers in Lady Eleanor and my sister, he assured her, helping her into the carriage. And perhaps, if you would permit it, an occasional guide in myself. Helena studied him thoughtfully. Why are you doing this, Lord Stanwick? You owe me nothing, yet you've inserted yourself into a potentially scandalous situation and offered solutions that involve your own family. His expression grew serious. In truth, Miss Pennington, I find myself intrigued by a young woman of such courage and determination. You might have blackmailed the Duke or created a public scandal. Instead, you sought only what was rightfully yours with dignity and restraint. Such character is rare in any circle. Their eyes held for a moment longer than propriety strictly allowed, and Helena felt a curious warmth spread through her chest. Then I shall look forward to your guidance, Lord Stanwick. Zephyr, he reminded her with a smile. At least when we are not observed by the judgmental eyes of society. Zephyr, she repeated softly, until we meet again. And meet again they did, dear reader, with increasing frequency in the weeks that followed. Lady Beatrice, upon hearing her brother's carefully edited version of Helena's circumstances, embraced the role of sponsor with enthusiasm. The notion of rescuing a gently bred young woman from reduced circumstances appealed to her generous nature, and she found in Helena a companion whose intelligence and wit matched her own. Lady Eleanor, true to her word, provided Helena with a wardrobe suitable for her new position and arranged for her quiet introduction into society as my late cousin's daughter from Dorset, who has been living in somewhat reduced circumstances since her mother's passing. The ton, always eager for fresh blood in their ranks, accepted this explanation with minimal questioning. A connection to the Duchess of Hartsfield, however distant, provided Helena with immediate social acceptance, and her natural grace and beauty did the rest. The Duke, for his part, maintained a careful distance, acknowledging Helena at social gatherings with the polite indifference one might show to a family connection of no particular significance. If society gossips noted occasional similarities in their coloring or expressions, such observations remained whispered speculation rather than confirmed scandal. Lord Stanwick, meanwhile, found himself increasingly drawn to the young woman he had helped introduce to society. Their initial connection, formed under such unusual circumstances, deepened with each encounter. He discovered in Helena a mind as quick as his own, a wit that challenged rather than simpered, and a perspective on society that was both fresh and insightful. "You see us all so clearly," he remarked during a dance at Lady Jerningham's ball, 3 weeks after Helena's debut in society. "It's rather disconcerting." Helena smiled, executing a perfect turn as the country dance required. "I have the advantage of being both insider and outsider, my lord. I observe with the clarity of one not raised within your rules, yet I must learn them quickly to survive." "And how do you find our rules?" he asked, genuinely curious. "Arbitrary, contradictory, and occasionally nonsensical," she replied promptly, "yet oddly comforting in their structure. There is security in knowing precisely where one stands, even if that position is built upon artifice." Lord Stanwick laughed, drawing the attention of several nearby dancers. "Miss Pennington, you continue to delight me with your honesty. Most young ladies would offer platitudes about the elegance of society." "Most young ladies," she reminded him as they came together again in the pattern of the dance, "have not experienced life from both sides of the social divide." As the weeks passed and the season progressed, Helena's position in society solidified. The initial curiosity about the Duchess's previously unmentioned relation gave way to acceptance, particularly as Helena demonstrated both the manners and accomplishments expected of a gently bred young woman. Lord Stanwick's obvious interest did not go unnoticed, generating speculation that ranged from mild curiosity to outright wagers in the gentlemen's clubs regarding when he might declare himself. Lady Beatrice observed her brother's growing attachment with satisfaction, having developed genuine affection for her new companion. "He looks at you as though you've hung the moon in stars," she remarked to Helena one evening as they prepared for yet another ball. "I've never seen Zephyr so captivated." Helena, who had been carefully guarding her heart despite her growing feelings for Lord Stanwick, adjusted her gloves with studied casualness. "Your brother has been exceedingly kind to a newcomer in society. I'm sure his interest is merely that of a benevolent sponsor." Lady Beatrice snorted in a most unladylike fashion. "My dear Helena, if you believe that, you are not nearly as observant as I've given you credit for. Zephyr has refused introductions to the season's most eligible debutantes, declined invitations to events where you are not included, and somehow manages to appear at your side within moments of entering any gathering. These are not the actions of a benevolent sponsor." Before Helena could formulate a response, their carriage arrived at their destination, the Hartfield house, where the Duke and Duchess were hosting their second major event of the season. "How fitting," Lady Beatrice observed as they ascended the steps. "The location of your first meeting hosts the event where I suspect my brother will finally declare himself." Helena felt her pulse quicken at the suggestion. "Beatrice, please. You'll create expectations that may lead only to disappointment." Lady Beatrice merely smiled enigmatically as they were announced and entered the ballroom. The evening proceeded much as these affairs typically did: dancing, conversation, carefully orchestrated social interactions designed to showcase wealth and status while ostensibly providing entertainment. Helena, now familiar with the rhythms of such events, navigated the crowd with growing confidence. Lord Stanwick found her, as Lady Beatrice had predicted, within moments of his arrival. "Miss Pennington," he greeted her with a bow that was perfectly correct and a smile that was anything but. "Might I hope for the supper dance?" "I believe my card remains open for that set," she replied, trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach at his proximity. "Excellent," he murmured, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that caused nearby matrons to exchange knowing glances. Until then. As Helena watched him move away to fulfill his social obligations, she became aware of the Duchess approaching. "My dear Helena," Lady Eleanor greeted her with genuine warmth. "You look lovely this evening. The blue brings out your eyes remarkably." "Thank you, Your Grace," Helena replied, still somewhat awed by the Duchess's continued kindness despite the circumstances of their connection. "I wonder if you might join me in my sitting room for a moment," Lady Eleanor continued. "There is a matter I wish to discuss privately." Curiosity piqued, Helena followed the Duchess through the familiar route to her private domain. To her surprise, the Duke awaited them, his expression uncharacteristically uncertain. "Miss Pennington," he acknowledged with a nod as they entered. "Your Grace," she responded, curtsying automatically. Lady Eleanor gestured for Helena to be seated, then took her own chair with the same graceful authority she brought to all situations. "Helena, my dear, His Grace and I have been observing your progress in society with great satisfaction. You have conducted yourself with admirable dignity and discretion." "Thank you, Your Grace," Helena replied, wondering where this conversation was leading. The Duke cleared his throat. "It has come to our attention that Lord Stanwick appears to have formed an attachment to you." Helena felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Lord Stanwick has been exceedingly kind. Kindness rarely involves the degree of attention he has bestowed upon you," Lady Eleanor observed with a smile. "We have reason to believe he may declare himself, perhaps even this evening." I was not aware that you monitored my social interactions so closely," Helena managed, unsure whether to be flattered or alarmed by this revelation. "In this case, we have a particular interest," the Duke stated, finally meeting her eyes directly. "Lord Stanwick approached me this afternoon to request a private conversation. The nature of such requests, particularly from unmarried gentlemen regarding young ladies under one's protection, is generally understood." Helena's heart began to race. "He spoke to you? About me?" "He did," the Duke confirmed. "And I found myself in the unusual position of needing to decide how to respond to a man seeking permission to court my daughter while maintaining the fiction that you are merely a distant relation." The word daughter, spoken aloud for the first time by the Duke, hung in the air between them. "What we wish to convey," Lady Eleanor continued gently, "is that should Lord Stanwick make his intentions known to you this evening, you may accept with our full blessing. His family is impeccable, his character beyond reproach, and his fortune sufficient to ensure your comfort. More importantly," the Duke added, his voice softer than Helena had ever heard it, "he sees you for yourself, not for your connection to our family or the circumstances of your birth. That is rare and valuable." Helena found herself momentarily speechless, overwhelmed by this unexpected development. "I don't know what to say." "Say nothing to us," Lady Eleanor advised with a gentle smile. "Save your words for Lord Stanwick, should he offer for you, as we anticipate. Know only that you go forward with our approval and our affection." The Duke nodded, his usual reserve softened by an emotion Helena couldn't quite identify. "You have comported yourself with honor in a situation not of your making, Miss Pennington. I find I cannot help but recognize certain qualities that I would be proud to see in any child of mine." This acknowledgement, limited though it was, represented more than Helena had ever truly expected to receive. "Thank you, Your Grace. Both of you. Your kindness has exceeded anything I could have imagined when I came to London." "Sometimes," Lady Eleanor observed, rising to indicate the conversation had reached its conclusion, "life's greatest challenges lead to unexpected blessings. Now, we should return to our guests before your absence is remarked upon." As they made their way back to the ballroom, Helena felt as though she were floating, barely tethered to the earth. The Duke's tacit acknowledgement, the Duchess's ongoing kindness, and the possibility that Lord Stanwick, Zephyr, might actually declare himself, it was almost too much to absorb. The orchestra was just beginning the supper dance as they re-entered the ballroom. Lord Stanwick appeared at her side as if conjured by her thoughts, his expression questioning as he noted her slightly dazed appearance. "Is everything all right?" he asked quietly as he led her onto the dance floor. Helena smiled up at him, suddenly certain in a way she hadn't been before her conversation with the Duke and Duchess. "Yes, I believe it is. Or rather, it will be." The dance required their separation before he could inquire further, but his eyes remained fixed on her face whenever the pattern brought them together. When the music finally concluded, he retained her hand in his. "Would you care for some air?" he suggested, nodding toward the terrace doors. "The gardens are quite pleasant in the evening light." "Helena, recognizing both the invitation and its implications, nodded. That would be lovely. As they stepped into the garden, the very same garden where their unusual connection had begun, Helena felt a sense of completion, as though a circle were closing. The spring air was fragrant with roses and possibility. Lord Stanwick led her to a small bench partially concealed by a flowering arbor, ensuring they remained visible from the terrace but affording them a measure of privacy. "Miss Pennington, Helena," he began, his usual eloquence seemingly deserting him. "I find myself in the unusual position of being at a loss for words." Helena smiled, emboldened by the knowledge that he had already spoken to the Duke. "That is indeed unusual for a man of your scholarly reputation, my lord." His answering smile held equal measures of nervousness and determination. "I have spent my life among books and ideas, comfortable in the realm of the intellect, but far less adept in matters of the heart. Until I met you." He took her hands in his expression more serious than she had ever seen it. "From that first extraordinary encounter in this very garden, you have captivated me. Your courage, your intelligence, your capacity for forgiveness, all mark you as the most remarkable woman of my acquaintance." Helena felt tears pricking at her eyes, but they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. "Lord Stanwick, Zephyr, please," he continued, "allow me to finish before my courage fails me. I know the circumstances of our acquaintance were unusual. I know your position in society is complicated, but I find that none of that matters to me. What matters is the woman you are, principled, intelligent, and possessed of a strength that humbles me." He took a deep breath, then dropped to one knee before her, still holding her hands in his. "Miss Helena Pennington, would you do me the very great honor of becoming my wife?" For a moment, Helena could only look at him in wonder. 6 months ago, she had been a young woman of no prospects, embarking on a desperate gamble to secure some small measure of security from a father who had abandoned her mother. Now, she knelt before her, offering not just security but partnership, respect, and love. "Yes," she whispered, then more firmly, "Yes, Zephyr. I would be honored to become your wife." His smile blazed with such joy that Helena felt her heart might burst from her chest. Rising from his knee, he drew her to her feet and, with a quick glance to ensure they were unobserved, pressed a brief, tender kiss to her lips. "You have made me the happiest of men," he murmured against her hair as he embraced her. "I shall spend my life ensuring you never regret your decision." As they returned to the ballroom, their faces glowing with barely contained happiness, they found the Duke and Duchess watching them with knowing smiles. Lady Eleanor inclined her head slightly in acknowledgement, while the Duke, in a gesture that spoke volumes, raised his glass in a subtle toast. Lady Beatrice, observing this exchange from across the room, made her way to Helena's side as Lord Stanwick was momentarily claimed by a friend. "Well?" she demanded in a whisper. "Am I to congratulate myself on acquiring a sister?" Helena's radiant smile was answer enough, and Lady Beatrice embraced her with genuine affection. "I knew it. No man looks at a woman the way Zephyr looks at you, without harboring serious intentions." "Oh, this is splendid news." The formal announcement of their engagement appeared in the Morning Post 3 days later, generating precisely the flutter of interest one would expect for a match between one of society's most eligible bachelors and the Duchess of Hartsfield's previously unknown relation. Speculation regarding Helena's background continued in some quarters, but the combined protection of the Sutton and Stanwick families effectively silenced any serious questioning. Their wedding, held 6 weeks later in the Stanwick family chapel, was attended by the cream of society. The Duke gave the bride away, a gesture whose significance was known only to the principals involved, and the Duchess hosted a wedding breakfast that was declared the social event of the month. As Lord and Lady Stanwick departed for their wedding journey to Italy, the Duke approached Helena for a final, private word. "I wish you every happiness," he said simply, his usual reserve softened by genuine emotion. "You have shown grace under circumstances that might have broken a lesser spirit. Your mother would be proud of the woman you've become." Helena, touched by this acknowledgement, curtsied one final time to the man who had given her life. "Thank you, Your Grace, for everything." As their carriage pulled away amid a shower of rose petals and well wishes, Helena turned to her husband with tears of joy sparkling in her eyes. I came to London seeking acknowledgement from one man, only to find love with another. Life is indeed full of unexpected turns. Lord Stanwick, her Zephyr, took her hand and pressed it to his lips. The best stories always are, my love, and ours is just beginning. And so, dear reader, our tale concludes with that most satisfying of endings. Lovers united, secrets managed rather than exposed, and a future bright with promise. The tongue would continue to whisper, of course, for such is its nature. But behind the closed doors of Stanwick House, a new family took root, founded not on scandal but on that rarest of commodities in high society, genuine love.